Welcome into the Autzen Audibles Podcast. Matt Prehm, Jared Mack on this Monday edition of the podcast. Opening up the mailbag. It's been a little bit since we've done one of these. We've got some good questions, a little bit of everything. We've got some recruiting, we've got some football, we've got some baseball that we'll touch on today's show. And Jared, let's start off here with the recruiting segments first. Ducks Cruise is question number one. Jordan Snyder is question number one. Does this 2024 recruiting class have the potential to flirt with or surpass the 300 points in the rankings? Some context here. 300 points is right around what is required for a top 5 finish. Sometimes it's not, sometimes top 4 is all you get with a 300 ranking. Other times, it's close. Oregon's highest rated class in 2021 came in at 287. So they've never actually reached the 300-point plateau from a recruiting ranking perspective previously. Now, Oregon's current recruiting class is 10th in the country in the composite. They are at 178. So they are past halfway with just 10 commitments. Seven of those guys.
That's not updated yet. They still have Ife Obadegwu in there. He's at the class itself now is 195.13. Yeah. 190. Yeah, so they're 7th. I think that is. I think Florida State is at 192.
Why is the composite not showing that? That's interesting. Well,
yeah, but when you go to the class calculator to add it, it's already added in. So
yeah, I don't
know. Nonetheless.
Site maintenance issue, I guess. But nonetheless, yeah, Oregon's past halfway, 195, just under 200. Jared, I think if my answer is if the question was flirt with 300, yes, they're right on track for that. They are going to be right under 300 right now. Surpass 300, that's where it gets dicey. That's where it gets interesting because you're going to be required from an Oregon standpoint. You got to have a couple 5-stars in this class if you're going to hit the 300 mark, or if you don't have a 5-star, basically every guy you add moving forward is like a top 247 guy. Every guy has got to be highly rated. So it's flirting. Absolutely. I'm all on board with that. Surpassing 300, they've never done it before. And it's kind of until they do it, I'm going to say no.
Yeah, I don't think people kind of understand how difficult it is to do this, to get to that 300 threshold. You see teams like Alabama and Georgia and Ohio State do it all the time, but I mean, they're just recruiting powerhouses. That's the other thing. And you get the random once a years with the Texas A&Ms and that 2022 class that broke all the records, which was then just broken the next season. But even still, like, that class, that Texas A&M class that everybody thinks is or was at the time like the world's best recruiting class, that was only 333 composite points. And so that's a bit over 300, but you're not 380, 390. It's extremely difficult to do so. And I think the thing or what Oregon will have to do, like you said, Matt, is they can't really afford to add any more 3-stars in this class if they want to get to that 300 threshold. You look at that 2022 season, the most 3-stars to get to 300 was 8. But Georgia also had 5 stars. Texas A&M that year had 8 of them. You go to last year's recruiting class, which I thought for Oregon was a pretty darn good one, coming in at 278. I think that's the second highest in Oregon history. The 3 classes that did get over 300 had a combined 12 3-stars. Oregon itself had 9. So that's the difference. So you need to add as many 5-stars as you can, and you need to not have as many 3-stars as you can. And it's fine if Oregon doesn't flirt with 300. It's not a bad thing. It's just really, really hard because not only are you fighting teams within your own conference for players, for Oregon specifically, it would be USC, UCLA, all those, bigger powerhouses on the Pac-12. But you're also going to be fighting against every team I just mentioned. You're going to be going against the Georgias, the Bamas, the A&Ms, the Oklahomas, the Ohio States, the Miamis, it's Clemson and 2. It's difficult. It's going to be really hard for Oregon to do it. But They've had a great start to this class now with eight 4 stars, three 3 stars. I think that's the philosophy they need. I know we'll get to this in a second for our second question on the show, and they're in contention with a lot of other high caliber recruits in this 2024 class.
Yeah, that's just segue right into the second question for the show because it's my talking point of how they're going to get to 300. Wink asks, realistically, how many 5-star recruits does Oregon sign in 2024? If possible, who are the possibilities? This bleeds right into, like I said, how Oregon gets to 300. I think there's 3 guys that are 5-star players that you say there's a decent chance that Oregon can go out and land one of these guys right now. And it starts with David Stone, the 5-star defensive lineman from Florida. He was here for the spring game. Is he as realistic as the other 2 names I have on my list? No, but he has strong interest in Oregon. The next guy is Stone is 7th in the country overall. Second best defensive lineman in the country. We should note Williams Nwaneri. He put Oregon in his top 10. You had that story up on duckterritory.com. Oregon made the cut. He's the number 1 defensive lineman in the country. He's the 3rd best player overall. Oregon's there, obviously. But my second player is Elijah Rushing. He was here for ahead of the spring game. He's the number 1 edge player in the country. He's out of Arizona, so he's kind of a local guy. He's from Tucson, West Coast guy. Distance will help Oregon here. And then also you go down a little bit, and the number 1 offensive tackle is Brandon Baker out of Mater Dei High School in Southern California. Oregon's involved in other 5-stars, but I feel like those 3 feel like there's a good possibility Oregon lands one of those. If Oregon can get to 2, or if they can look at other 5-stars in the mix here, and pluck one of those guys as well, get to 2 or 3, then 300 becomes a very realistic scenario. But to get to 300, you need more than 1 5-star, and right now, I have a hard time if the over-under was 1.5 saying over. It could get there. That may change in 2 months, but 1 right now feels safe.
1 for sure feels safe. I would imagine Oregon probably feels best about Brandon Baker, just because brother Gary went to Oregon a couple of years ago. He's been to campus. I think he said in an article with Greg Biggins that he's been to 5 spring games. Pretty good. That's a good idea. He probably understands what campus looks like at this point.
Yeah.
And then Rushing is obviously the guy that Oregon has been after for years now under 2 different head coaches. Somebody who is going to be poached by basically every school in the country, as he should. Very talented player. But like you said, Matt, those are the 2, I would say, the favorites. David Stone. Diamond Stone was a former Maryland center, which is just a tremendous name. Williams Nwaneri, that's another guy that Oregon had made his top, I think it was top 11. Terry Busey was another guy that Oregon made his top 10 or top 7, whatever it was. But I think, you feel the most confident about Baker and Rushing. But even still, those are going to be difficult recruiting battles. And for Oregon, this is where you kind of look every season at where these top 30 guys are, where these top 5-stars are actually from in the country, because there aren't a whole lot of them coming from the West Coast, which is what helps Oregon sometimes and what really hurts Oregon other times. And that's why teams like Georgia, like Alabama, like Ohio State or Clemson or Florida, whoever the case may be, that's why that they have these tremendous classes, because, well, they can go visit a couple guys in one day, while Oregon, it's going to take, the recruiting staff a whole day to travel out to that side of the country, and then a whole day to go traverse that side of the country. So it's a bit more difficult there, and that's why Oregon has always had trouble getting that 300 threshold. But there's more guys that Oregon can certainly go after. Xavier Brown, cornerback out of Mater Dei. Aaron Scott, I think, is visiting Oregon soon. I think Greg Biggins had an article on that. Gatlin Blair, who just ran an absurd 100 meters over the weekend, is another guy that could potentially move in that 5-star category. Those are all 4 stars right now, but high 4 stars. Ryan Pelham from Long Beach, a wide receiver. That's somebody who Greg Biggins, I know I've name dropped him now 3 times, but someone that he said on the Autzen Audibles podcast that Oregon is very interested in, and he's also very interested in Oregon. Again, another high 4-star who can move into that 5-star range, but Oregon doesn't have a spectacular track record with attracting more than 3 5-star, 2 5-stars. Even last season, they get 2 5-stars on paper, but Mateo Uiagalelei drops at the end of the year, and Jurion Dickey is the only 5-star that commits to that class, so it's only 1. It's difficult. It's difficult, but they still can bring in a lot of talent, even if it's not 5 stars. But yeah, for the over/under on 1.5, like you said, it's difficult to say over, but I'll do it. I feel good that Rushing and Baker are both from the West Coast and have had connections with Oregon for a very long time.
Yeah, I'll certainly agree that the frequency of Oregon signing multiple 5-stars in a year has gone up, and
certainly,
and this is just like the big picture of the Oregon program building itself into, hopefully in their eyes, a national championship caliber. A team that wins the national championship. It used to be a case of just getting a 5-star on campus was a victory, and getting being in that final decision was a win, to then getting the rare occurrence of signing a 5-star prospect. And now it's kind of, I don't know if it's expected or if it's a fair, realistic expectation, but the idea is essentially every year you get one. And now it's starting to become a trend where it's, hey, maybe every other year or every third year, you're going to have a season in which you sign more than one 5-star in a recruiting class. I don't know if it's fair to say that it should happen every single year, but that's becoming the norm, or it's happening at least on a regular basis, where it's every year, or every 2 years or every 3 years, they sign multiple guys. And now we're starting to get into the threshold of, can they do 3? Can they do 4? And that's when you start building these programs and the depth and the talent roster of someone that can win a national championship. When you stack multiple years of multiple 5-stars and multiple top 100 guys, and you flirt with that 300 number ranking that Jordan brought up for 3 or 4 straight years, whether you're at 290 or 320 or 305 or 285, you do that for 3 or 4 years in a row. Now you're in a place where you can compete and really have the talent and the depth to have a chance at a national championship.
Yeah, and I think Oregon this season certainly has a very good chance of landing multiple 5-stars, and I would expect to go down the line of a Dan Lanning-led recruiting staff to have that chance basically every opportunity they get. You look back at the 2020 class for Oregon, that's 3 5-stars in Sewell and Flo and Dante Manning. And, say whatever you want about the players, but that was, a huge thing for Oregon then. I would still say it, it's still a big thing now with at least Dante Manning still on campus. But, Oregon's certainly positioning themselves to potentially get that same number again this year. I will say that, despite the fact that a lot of players, a lot of these highly rated 5-stars come from all across the country, I do think that in the last 2 years under Dan Lanning that they've done a tremendous job of picking places or going to different states and finding players in those states and the talent there. Obviously, Texas has been a huge recruiting pipeline for Oregon this past 2 years, especially last season. They have like 10 players from Texas, 6 or 8 to 10 players from Texas in their 2023 class. But you already look at this year's class, they've already jumped into Texas, obviously California and Arizona, but they've gotten a 4-star Tyone Gray from Missouri, Tysier Denmark from Pennsylvania, and then Obadegwu Iffy, our guy, St. Francis Academy down in Baltimore and the land. So they've done a good job of expanding their boundaries and where they are going to recruit compared to staffs in the past, compared to years in the past. I think that's a significant development and a significantly positive development for Oregon moving forward.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll finish the second half of the Mailbag show. All right, welcome back to the Autzen Audibles Podcast. Next question goes to On the Field from Ducks Cruz. Which game are you more worried about this season? USC, but they get to play in Autzen, at a hostile Utah, or playing against a very talented Washington team in Seattle. Hashtag Autzen Audibles. This is a good question. I think USC, in my eyes, has the best quarterback in the conference. Probably the most explosive offense. Maybe that's Washington. Washington beat Oregon, obviously, but that game's in the middle of October. It's not a game that's going to be late into November, when sometimes we get these crazy wind or rain games up in Montlake. And then there's Utah, and that's where I land. I think with this game being in late October, I understand USC's in November, but it's a road game against the most consistent team in the conference beyond Oregon, or maybe even ahead of Oregon, the last 5 or 6 seasons in the conference. They are a physical team. They are always hard to play for Oregon, and they just haven't won in Utah in a while. So I'm landing on Utah. They have history of winning in Seattle. They have history of beating USC. I think the home factor in the USC game matters. Just the elevation, the opponent, the quality of opponent, the lack of success in Salt Lake City. I'm going road game at Utah.
I think that's a fair pick. All three of these games are very difficult. I don't know. You could have picked any of them, and I would have probably said that that's a fair pick. I will say, I was there. It was in 21 when Oregon lost to Utah at Rice-Eccles Stadium. It's a tough environment to play in. It's definitely not easy. Even last year when Cameron Rising was hurt, Utah put up a hell of a fight. I know Bo Nix was also hurt, so that was a battle of the injured quarterbacks. Cam Rising is still hurt, so we'll see how he comes back and progresses through his injury for this upcoming season. I would expect by that point, though, that Utah would be looking like Utah. I don't know. Worried? I guess the question is worried about. I'm going to go with Washington. I think just to have a different answer than you, Matt, because I definitely Utah's definitely a worrisome game. It's going to be one of the hardest ones on the schedule. I guess I'll go with Washington. We'll see, though, because going into that game last season, I think we all anticipated that it would be a high-scoring affair no matter what, but that at one point Oregon would get the stop because of their run defense. But for that game, Washington just ran all over the field and threw all over the field with Michael Penix. Depending on how Oregon's defense looks to begin the season, I have no idea that it'll be any different. And that's pretty daunting if you're an Oregon defensive back, because that game was definitely not put on a lot of people's highlight reel tapes for very obvious reasons. And, Washington got better this offseason. It's just another year under Grubb and another year with Penix at the helm. Roma Dunze and Jalen McMillan are two guys that are going to be really difficult to stop this season. I think I kind of worry more about Washington's play style than Utah's play style, kind of similar to last year, where Oregon and Utah, I guess under the Mario Cristobal regime, more or less, kind of played a similar style where they're just going to smash neck and try to beat each other up in the trenches more than anything else compared to Washington. But I think that Washington game is going to be more interesting to me, and I would be a bit more worried. And I know it's on the road, but I think Rice-Eccles is a much more difficult place to play in after being to both. I know that was the bad year at Washington, so I certainly didn't get to live out like the 2019 year where Oregon went out there with Herbert and won. But I still think that Rice Eccles is more difficult, but it's Washington, so it's always going to have a little special extra kick to it at the end of the day.
I was just gonna say that game will be a little bit more juiced up because Washington won. They'll be confident. The fan base will be confident. And look, Michael Penix is an elite quarterback, and their receivers are elite as well. And like you said, it was not a game for an Oregon DB to copy and paste highlights because they got burned a ton of times. And I think that place will be really good from an environment, from a college football standpoint, better than 19. And in my opinion, because this Washington team could be top 5, they could be top 10. And I don't remember their schedule off the top of my head, but that could very well be a top 10 matchup, a top 15 type matchup in Montlake, and that's going to be it's going to be hostile. That was the game I would pick if it wasn't going to be Utah. And look, like you said, these are all difficult picks. We could have picked any combination that we wanted, and it would have been the right pick. Pac-12 is going to be good next year. There's just no way around it.
Very good, and it's going to be a tremendous send-off because that'll be the last year it exists. Can't wait.
All right,
I'm only kidding, but it's going to be a tremendous year. So many good quarterbacks, and I'm surprised Oregon State wasn't on that question though, because that's a worrisome game for some.
Yeah, they beat Oregon last year too, in a humiliating fashion too. Come from behind. Next question from Mike. After the impressive spring game, should we be penciling in Cole Martin for the 2 deep at cornerback? I think the important word here is penciling because that can be erased, that can be changed. If it was penned or inked in, I would say no. But right now, I think Cole Martin's going to play as a true freshman. Is he going to play 35-40% of the snaps in the secondary? No, I don't think that happens. I think he's on the special teams units. I think he finds his way onto the football field and select opportunities. But yeah, I think he's going to be a guy that plays as a true freshman, which would mean most likely he's on the 2 deep in some capacity.
No, I don't think so. I don't think Cole Martin is on the 2 deep. Look, he played star safety or star corner during the spring game, which was good. I thought he was really good. I think he'll play. I think he'll play special teams. I think he'll get in when kind of like a Jaleel Florence role last season. Was Jaleel Florence on the 2 deep? No, not really. My 2 deep, which you can read on duckterritory.com. I have Triquez Bridges, Kyrie Jackson, Dante Manning, Jaleel Florence. Cole Martin was the 3rd or 4th highest rated cornerback recruit in this past year's class. And Dalen Austin and Roderick Pleasant still aren't on campus yet. So I'm going to give them their piece, and then I'm going to let them try to play their way into a 2 deep. Look, I think Martin is a very, very talented player. And I think that he will play this season, but I'm not going to pencil him on the 2 deep. Oregon's cornerback room has a tremendous amount of talent this year. And Cole Martin is definitely a part of that, but there's still talent coming. We saw it in the spring game. I think that even if he sticks just at star, I wouldn't have him in the 2 deep there. I would still have Tysheem Johnson and Kamari Terrell, but I think that him and Terrell are more likely to battle first time at that star position than him and Dante Manning or Jaleel Florence or somebody of the other corners. So pencil in, you can do it. I'm just not going to. I still think that there's 4 or 5 guys ahead of Cole Martin in the cornerback room.
Well, this is another question that I'm going to segue here because if I think Cole plays more than 4 games. He's going to get on the field. Dylan Austin, Roderick Pleasant. Do all 3 play? Should all 3 play? Or should Oregon find a way to redshirt 1, 2, or all of these guys because of depth? I think they need to play. If they're ready to play.
Yeah, I think the redshirt thing is silly. I think I think what Dan says all the time, even though he doesn't actually follow up on it, like if you're good enough, you're old enough. He didn't play any true freshmen last year other than Josh Connolly, but I digress. If they're good enough, yeah, they got to get on the field. If Roderick Pleasant and Dalen Austin are day one, these guys are too good. They're not as good as Bridges or Jackson, but they're too good to just ride Pine. Yeah, you figure out a way to get him on the field. I think Pleasant's going to be Oregon's everyday kick returner. He's just too damn fast. He's going to be not really comparing, but he's going to be the equivalent of what Mikael Wright was in that 2019 team. Even though Mikael Wright is not nearly as fast as Roderick Pleasant. So that's going to be, 4 games down the drain just immediately. It's always nice to have an extra year eligibility, but if players are that good, they're only going to be there for 3 years anyways. So, and if you're Oregon, you're certainly hoping that Dalen Austin and Roderick Pleasant are this good. Not because they need them, but in a couple of years they're going to. And Cole Martin, they're going to need him too. But, I think all of the true freshman cornerbacks, at least the 4 stars guys that are coming in should see playing time. But I think Cole is probably going to be the third of those group. But it does help him being a coach's son and getting to school and to camp early, because now he knows the playbook. That's a whole thing that he doesn't have to learn in the summer when everybody else does.
All right. Last question comes from Theo Winter. Baseball question. With only 2 more regular season series left against Washington and Utah, how important is it that we get these W's to end the season? And do you think we still have a chance at hosting a super regional matchup? Now, Jared, it's been about a week and a half, 2 weeks since we've spoke on the podcast about baseball. And since then, the Ducks have lost 4 of their last 5 games. Arizona State, Oregon State, USC twice. They lost the series on the road. As the resident baseball guy of the podcast, seems like they've kind of hit a little down spurt here, and they've, maybe some things, their resume has taken a hit a little bit.
Yeah, kind of more or less. I think the USC series this past weekend was, derailed early because Jay Stoffel, their Friday night starter, did not pitch on Friday for reasons undisclosed. Kendall Rogers of D1 Baseball said that he wasn't injured and that he was just scratched. I've reached out to people on the staff and I haven't heard back, so that's not necessarily a good sign. But again, I'll talk to head coach Mark Wasikowski on Wednesday and we'll find out where that goes. But without Stoffel, Oregon's pitching staff it's pretty barren. It's not great. And they had to put 2 true freshmen on the mound, and Leo Ullman and Matthew Grabman on Sunday to start. And USC took advantage of that. They had 2 big innings, which is what happens a lot with freshman pitchers. They just allow a mistake to kind of, snowball. And then ultimately there's 4 or 5 runs who cross home plate. And that's exactly what happened on Friday and Sunday. The Oregon State game midweek start, Oregon certainly had their opportunities to go and take or cut into the lead of the Beavers and maybe take that game. But they fall to 1-3 on the year against Oregon State, which isn't great. It's a good Oregon State team, top 15 in the country. As for how important is it to win these final 2 regular season series? Really important. I think winning every series is important. I think Oregon has kind of firmly supplanted themselves as a potential regional host. The recent projections haven't come out, but I would imagine that they're either right on the edge or that they are still intertwined as the 12 seed there in Eugene. The other thing that Oregon has going for them is that PK Park is a tremendous field and has a tremendous clubhouse and really good features for any of the traveling journalists or news stations or TV channels that want to go there. It's certainly something the NCAA will think about when they host or when they decide who the regional hosts are. So that's a positive. But if Oregon wins these final 2 series, I would certainly pen them in to be a regional host. It's just going to be difficult because Oregon State is certainly worthy of it, but I don't think they're going to have 2 in the Pacific Northwest. And I think that a company like ESPN, who covers it all, probably would take Oregon's over Oregon State's. We'll see. I think they're both deserving of it, but I think Oregon does have the upper hand in the facilities venue. Lastly, for hosting a super regional matchup, no chance. At this point, no chance. Oregon dropped to 23rd, 24th in the rankings today after a 1-3 week, which is expected. I expected them to drop all the way out. Super Regionals, no chance. I mean, you got to be a top 12 seed. Oregon's right on the kind of, or excuse me, not even a top 12 seed. You got to be a top 8 seed, I think it is, six seed. Oregon's not close to that. And the Pac-12 the Pac-12 is really top heavy. It's what it has been in year past. The top 4 seeds are really good. Everybody else is not. And you look at you look at a conference like the SEC, where Tennessee, which went into the season as like a top 5 team in the country, is now 25th. That's a really good conference. Tennessee, Florida, Vanderbilt, LSU, obviously, who just was kicked out of number 1 on the polls for the first time all season long. That's a damn good conference. So every weekend there's your RPIs going up, your rankings are either going up or down. There's just too much competition there for Oregon to even think about being a super regional host. But regional hosts, yeah, with 2 series wins in the next 2 weeks, I could see it happening.
Now we should note they play Washington at home for a home series finale. The Huskies are 5th in the conference at 13-10 in league play, and then they go on the road to last place Utah, who's 18-1, a tie game. That's strange in baseball. I
remember that one. That was against UCLA, and UCLA, They had a flight that needed to leave, and they said, all right, we're stopping the game here. We're tying. So it happened. Oregon, they had that happen to Oregon last year. They were up like 21-4, and they were like, we got a plane to catch. We got to leave. It's like, we're ending this after 8 innings.
Mind you, those 2 teams are not the only teams in the conference to have a tie. USC also has a tie this season. Mm-hmm. You get some funky stuff in college baseball with flights and road trips home and what have you. But safe to say, Jared, knowing they play 2 teams who are further down the standings than them, they've basically, if they want to guarantee a regional, do they got to go 6-0, or can they drop one of these games?
Going 6-0 obviously would secure it, but no, I think if they win both of them, so I think if they go 4-2, 2-1, I think that 2-1 each time, I think that they're fine. Washington is a solid program. Their overall record isn't great, but their conference record, they're only half game back of the Ducks. So this would be a battle for the 4th seed, and I do believe the top 4 seeds in the Pac-12 tournament get a first round bye, if I remember correctly. So that would mean that Oregon doesn't play on Tuesday, the 24th, and will begin their tournament on Wednesday, the 25th. So I think that's important as well. But Utah, not great. But Washington can swing it. They're kind of built like Oregon. They don't have a great pitching staff, but they can certainly slug with the best of them. It's going to be a fun weekend. It's supposed to be wicked hot, I think it is. So that's exciting for at least me sitting there in the press box. It's going to be nice outside.
It's going to be 95 degrees on Sunday.
Yeah, and Oregon's probably playing at noon. I got to schedule somewhere around here, but it's going to be wicked hot. And I'm excited for that. But overall, to answer the question, Matt, yeah, I think going 4-2 bare minimum gets them a regional host, depending on, again, if the NCAA wants 2 regionals that are in the Pacific Northwest, which for how good Oregon and Oregon State have been this year, wouldn't be surprised.
All right, that's going to do it for us here on the Autzen Audibles podcast. Thank you for submitting your questions. We really appreciate it. Thank you for listening to the show. Until later this week, when we bring back Eric Scopel on the pod. You've been listening to the Autzen Audibles podcast.
Peace.